our year one season has officially come to a close, and it's now time to look at the stats, awards, and give our final draft preview ahead of the offseason here. Now, normally in this episode, I would have compiled highlights, but this time around, I just had a really busy week and I didn't have time to do it. So we'll have to just be focusing more on stats and awards from this season. And then we'll get to highlights in future episodes that will also force me to be a little bit more concise in my review for most of our players, because normally I would have all these highlights to give my full thoughts on them, but I don't have that this time. So, as you can see here, going through the Pro Bowl, we only had one Pro Bowler. It's maybe a little bit of a surprise. We'll get to somebody who I thought would make the Pro Bowl, but didn't. Well, let's now start talking about our players, starting with our quarterback, Randy McCoy. And I think it's hard to understate just how disappointing he was. His accuracy was a major problem, and he was the only quarterback I've ever had that had more interceptions and touchdowns in a season. I do think morale played a pretty heavy impact on that, though, and I think it'll be better next season, should he remain the starter, which certainly is no guarantee. Devon Kershaw ended up the year with just under 800 yards. I think he could be part of, a committee someday, but I don't think he should remain kind of the bell cow that he was last year. Doug Odom, he was awesome. As you can see here, he ended up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. A little bit of a spoiler there, but he went not only up to star dev, but up to superstar dev. Our entire offense revolved around him. Maybe a little bit too much. I think getting another offensive weapon could really help me maybe not focus in on Odom too much, but I really like Odom. I'd really like to get him more underneath looks next year, I think, to take advantage of his after the catch ability, but he proved his abilities as a deep threat last year. And that brings us to Niles Kramer, who I think is a solid guy. I don't know if I trust him enough for him to be the second best option in an attack, though. And kind of looking at the rest of the guys, Luke Ramsey, okay at tight end. He made a couple of really big plays for us, but could probably do with an upgrade there. I think Zach Williams was our third receiver. He could definitely be upgraded on as well. I just think I need it. Probably in the long term, 2 more pass catching options, but I would really like to get one in this next year's draft. Taking a look now at the offensive line, Michael Jackson, the football player, leading us in sacks allowed is a little bit disappointing, but our right tackle actually would have done it had we not benched him. But these are a lot of sacks allowed. Part of playing with a slow quarterback, but also I just think, our offensive line is also just not talented. Jamal Arnaud would lead us in tackles, no surprise, 162. Has a good chance, I think, to lead the league. 14 TFLs with 4.5 sacks as well, an interception, 7 deflections, and 3 forced fumbles. He was absolutely awesome for us this year. Worth the high pick we spent on him. Lastly, ended up having a really solid year too. I will say that it felt like most of his TFLs and sacks came from free rushes on our 6-man pressures, and they also came early in the year. I felt like he was a lot less impactful as the season went on, at least against the run. I felt like more of his deflections actually came later in the year, though. Dakota Rich was very hot and cold throughout the year. I feel like at times he was targeted, but other times he was making plays. Only 2 deflections feels wrong. I swear I saw more than 2 deflections in the games that we watched. Keontae Simmons, he has a lot of expectations on him with being, a first-round pick at safety. I just think DBs typically take a little bit of time, so I was maybe a little bit disappointed in his impact this year, but I still don't feel any worse about him long-term. Antoine Weber is somebody that I was probably the most pleasantly surprised with out of anybody on our roster. Just played really solid football, and honestly, for about half of the season, I thought he was playing better than Malik Vincent. Vincent really turned it on at the end of the year and proved why he's our corner one, though. Looking at sack leaders, Warren Owens led us with 6, which is very interesting because he's really our run stuffer. He's leading us in TFLs as well, tied with Jamal Arnaud. But, having your nose tackle lead you in sacks isn't super comforting. And then having your best pass rusher only have 3.5 sacks, I think proves just how much pass rush needs to improve for us. I just think if you want a good defense, you have to have a pass rush, because the quarterbacks, if they're just going to sit there all day, they're going to pick you apart. No matter how good your initial coverage is, it's eventually somebody's going to get open. And so I think pass rush is probably our number one need. You don't want your nose tackle leading you there. Tony Dawson, he made all 18 of his field goals, which is really awesome. His long was 55. He doesn't have the greatest power, but he's very accurate, and it showed this year. Walsh, those feel like he's probably going to be one of the worst punters in the league, but we'll check on that in just a moment here as we'll go through the league-wide stats as well. Sidney Coleman with that kickoff return touchdown early on in the year. And Doug Odom in one of the games in simulation returned a punt for a touchdown as well, so that's pretty cool. But now let's go ahead and look at how some of our stats compare to everyone else in the league. Joe Burrow would lead the NFL in passing yards with 4,500. I do like where the stats are at in Madden 24 more than I did in Madden 23 for sure. It feels like reasonable stats are more attainable. This maybe even feels maybe a little bit too low if you ask me, but we do have a lot of quarterbacks over 30 passing touchdowns, which is pretty neat, but we don't have we don't have anybody in the 40s really. Ronnie McCoy would end up not leading the league in interceptions. That would be Bryce Young. We contributed to that when we played them. I think we picked him off once or twice. I remember one specifically, but I think we did a couple of times. And Aaron Rodgers, the Jets were the most surprising bad team, and it looks like Aaron Rodgers was a big part of that. He would end up retiring at the end of this year, so 28 and 19. A 19 interceptions season for Rodgers is certainly not something you would expect, and it looks like maybe that kicked him out the door. Looking at the rushers, we got 4 running backs over 1,500 yards and quite a few more over 1,000. The league is very, very talented at this position, and I'm working on getting some XP and regression sliders that I want to be finished before the end of next season, so that some of these older backs will start to regress pretty hard. Derrick Henry was the best in terms of average with 5.7 of all the full-time backs. And then a ton of backs here had over 10 touchdowns. I still think rushing touchdowns need a little bit of tuning maybe. I don't know. I'd have to see how many had 10 plus touchdowns last year, but Jalen Hurts getting those 10 rushing touchdowns is probably a big reason why he ended up winning MVP. CD Lamb, he caught 114 balls for 1,600 yards and 19 touchdowns. That looks like easily the best wide receiver year. Cooper Kupp being there at 4 feels good. I said at the end of last season when Kupp had another 2,000 yard season that I was hoping that was more of an anomaly. It looks like maybe it will be. Travis Kelce being all the way up there is cool to see as well. Doug Odom, we saw there's the best receiver under 1,200 yards at just under that mark, but CeeDee Lamb would also lead in receiving touchdowns. Got a lot of people here in the double digits. We saw Odom there with 12. So Odom, already seeing his name in his rookie year, kind of in that borderline top 10 in these yards and touchdowns is really cool to see. Now, Brendan Decker played 1,000 snaps, didn't allow a sack this year, so good job by him. And then the people who allowed the most, maybe some names that you wouldn't expect to see here, if we're being honest, but here are all the people that allowed double-digit sacks. We have 3 of them. That's right. We have 3 of the 12 linemen that allowed double-digit sacks this year. Jamal Arnott, in terms of total tackles, would have the lead in the league by a grand total of 21. He was all over the field for us. The defense was on the field a lot, though, so I'm not super surprised by it. If you take just solo tackles, he's still top 10, which I feel like is pretty rare for these series. I feel like most people get just a ton of assisted tackles, and you'll see that we have both of our middle linebackers are in the top 5 there. But usually, like, a lot of people on my defense are in the top 5. It feels like the top 10 is mostly my team, so kind of cool to see it a little bit more balanced out with this year. TJ Watt leads the league in sacks. 2 players went over 20, him and Parsons. Parsons, dude, why I gave the Cowboys Jonathan Allen to give them just the most sick defensive line ever. It makes no sense to me, dude. I was not in my right mindset when I made that decision. Oh, their defensive line is going to be a problem for us throughout the entirety of this series, it feels like. Unless they can't afford everybody, which is kind of my hope eventually. A lot of people here with double-digit deflections. We didn't have anybody at that mark, so we don't have anybody near the league lead there. But I do think we'll get there eventually. Tyler Bass made the most field goals, but Dawson was just one behind him, and he didn't miss any, so he made the most field goals while getting them at 100%. We punted the most by a grand total of 24, which is no surprise. We were terrible. I'm honestly surprised we punted that much more than anybody else, though, just because a lot of them were interceptions and fumbles. But in simulation, I guess we probably punted a lot. In terms of kick return touchdowns, there were 3. We had one of them. And then in punt return touchdowns, there were 5. And we had one of them. So we had 2 of the 8 return touchdowns on the year, which is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take a look now at the awards. Jalen Hurts would win MVP. Arthur Smith would be Coach of the Year. CeeDee Lamb, to no surprise, Offensive Player of the Year. Doug Odom being 10th in Offensive Player of the Year and not making the Pro Bowl does not make sense to me. Michael Parsons wins Defensive Player of the Year for the NFC. That is no surprise. Jamal Arnaud comes in at number 8 in the rankings. And Doug Odom would win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Kershaw would come in at 5. And then we'd also have 9 and 10 with Kramer and Ramsey. Jamal Arnaud would win Defensive Rookie of the Year. No surprise there. We would have the top 6 vote getters. Lastly, in second, Owens in third. I'd probably swap those in terms of how impressed I was with all of them. I'm not surprised by these other nominations at all. Jalen Hurts was the best quarterback. He won MVP, so that's no surprise. Best running back. Didn't have anybody there. Doug Odom was the 5th best receiver in the NFC, so how he didn't get a Pro Bowl vote is pretty interesting to me. 10th place for Offensive Player of the Year. 5th best receiver. Both of those would suggest he is a Pro Bowler, but he didn't make it, which is fine. Just kind of annoying that he misses out on some XP that seems like he should have had, for sure. Best linebacker is always going to go to edge rushers, but Jamal Arnaud being 4th place is, I think, the highest I've seen for an off-ball linebacker in quite some time. Best defensive back, Malik Vincent would just crack the top 10 here in the NFC. So cool to see him, kind of surge at the end of the year and get rewarded for it. Tony Dawson wins best kicker, which should give him star dev and a little bit of XP, which is exciting as well. And let's go ahead and just take a quick look at all the award winners in the AFC as well. Just based on what I saw in the league-wide stats, no surprises here, really. Maybe Boyd at receiver. But, yeah, no surprises here. Pretty much household names, except for the Rookies of the Year, obviously, who are generated players across the board. But not only is it important to look at individual stats, we got to look at how we did as a team. And offensively, we had the worst yardage output by 300 whole yards, which is not what we average per game. We had the 3rd worst passing offense in the league, just behind the Bears and the Browns. In terms of rushing, we were 2nd worst as well. So we weren't worst in either of the categories, but the fact that we were one of the 3 worst in both definitely put us at the bottom. Scored almost 3 points less than anybody else in the league. Passing touchdowns, only the Cardinals had less than us, and the Bills only having 19 is a really, really big surprise. Rushing touchdowns, we had by far the least in the league. The Dolphins next up, almost doubling us. And we also had 23 less first downs than anyone else in the league. Just far and away the league's worst offense. Need to do Need to make several moves, honestly, to improve that side. But the same can be said about the defense, because we allowed almost 800 yards more than the next worst defense in the league. I do think part of that was a product of being put in bad situations, but at the same time, there was also times when the defense was just getting taken to the woodshed. We allowed the most passing yards in the league and the most rushing yards by pretty much 400 yards. So just looking at this, you'd think our defense was worse than our offense. We allowed way more points than anybody else. And they did do really bad in most of our simulated games, to my surprise, honestly. Sacks were kind of middle of the pack. Forced fumbles, that would be the same. We were at 4, which is kind of tied for pretty much everyone in the middle of the league. And then interceptions, we were one of the bottom teams in the league. So just looking off those, you'd think our defense was worse than our offense. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like I said, I think the offense was putting them on the field a lot and in bad situations, coming off turnovers and stuff like that. Our red zone efficiency is unacceptable, man. That 27% with the next worst being 50 is awful. That is something that I need to improve. I need to improve my play calling there in the red zone. That's going to be one of my main personal goals, because I think that's mostly a me problem and not necessarily a team problem. This is not going to be a pretty screen for us. Yeah, we were worse in the league in terms of turnover differential. We had the most giveaways in the league by 3. Tied for the most interceptions because Bryce Young played the whole year and we had Summers play a little bit. So takeaways, we were kind of just below average there, but below average in takeaways with worst turnovers in the league. Yep, that's going to get you a pretty bad ranking for sure. So a lot that we need to improve on in this year, and I'm excited to preview the draft to show you all those possible improvements. But let's take a look at what happened in the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs would beat the Cowboys. So we have a division representative in the NFC for both of the Super Bowls thus far, but Eagles won and the Cowboys lost, which I am certainly okay with. And just one last thing to do before we finally take a look at this draft and how we can improve this terrible team is let's go ahead and get some upgrades in. First, for Rookie of the Year, Jamal Arnaud. I think just going through these upgrades, this team was really, like, there were 2 good players. It was Arnaud and Odom. I still have faith that a lot of other players that we have on the roster this year will eventually be good, positive impact players. It was really 2, honestly, this year. There was one guy on each side of the ball that we were going through. I guess that's probably unfair. I think Warren Owens actually had a good year for a rookie nose tackle. 14 TFLs and 6 sacks. That's kind of disrespectful. Boy was good, but he was also getting usered a ton by me because I was using strictly the interior defensive lineman. I don't know if I'm going to do that next year. I might user edge, kind of like I did in Madden 23. I like to user the defensive line just so that everyone in coverage can kind of play to their ratings and not have like the series be dependent on how good I am at usering coverage. But at the same time, when I'm using defensive linemen, their stats can also be boosted. So trying to find a balance of trying to make the defense play to their ratings, but also have fun using the defense as well. I don't think using the DTs was necessarily boring last year at all by any means. Let's go ahead and take a look at all the dev ups and downs of the year. And there's one here I particularly want to talk about with Randy McCoy going from superstar all the way to normal. Now, typically I don't like it when people regress their devs after their rookie season. I do think Randy McCoy played bad enough to make an exception for it, but I'm kind of leaning towards just giving him star dev rather than normal dev. I think reducing a dev is fair because he played awful, but 2 devs after just your rookie year seems a bit harsh to me. And so I'm fine with him losing superstar dev, but I think I'm going to give him star dev to start next year. Just only regress 1 dev seems like a fair compromise because he was just a rookie. Fowler, I think, not surprising to me, ends up with Superstar Dev. Just took him to the end of year 2, reveal it. And then I see Rowland went down. He didn't really play, so I don't mind that dev down either. And no one changed dev because Arnad was already an X Factor. He couldn't go up with any of his awards or anything. And nobody else played good enough to increase. I'm almost surprised that the game didn't decrease Lambert to star, though. That would have been one that I vetoed. Like I said, in most cases, I don't like rookies getting their dev trait reduced after just their rookie year. I like to give them at least 2 years to establish themselves before I think they deserve any sort of dev down. But I will make a special case for Randy McCoy. And between now and next season, I will be giving him star dev back because he played awfully, but 2 devs after just your rookie year seems a little bit harsh to me. But now let's finally go ahead and preview this upcoming draft. And now it's time to talk about this upcoming draft class. And something that I like to do come the offseason is take this big list of players that we've gone through and turn it into a short list of just players that I'm more keen on drafting. And so still have 38 players on my overall board, but I have narrowed down the 15 players I like most. And now we're not going to be able to take all 15 of them, of course. I still am not 100% sure of the strategy I'm going to take in this class, but I'm going to walk through each and every pick, what my options are for them, starting with our first pick, which will be at number 1 overall. And there's really a 2-person battle for that selection. We're first going to talk about Jordan Towns. And this decision is really coming down to safety versus upside. And Jordan Towns is the safety here. He is older. For a prospect, I don't like to draft 23-year-olds all too often, but Jordan Towns is a guaranteed top 5 talent in this class, despite the fact that he's not, athletic. He's going to be, at best, an average athlete at best, but ready-made pass protector, just elite in that area. Run blocking, not too bad either. C run block with B in both finesse and power. But not athletic, kind of old. You just know you're drafting a really good offensive lineman who's going to be an awesome pass protector. Pass protection was a problem in this season. And he is the number 1 player on the overall, consensus board. And usually when there's a tackle that's at number 1 overall and he has the talent to match it, he's usually superstar dev. I can't say always because there's, I'm sure, cases where that's, not the development trait of that player, but you get a very, very high success rate of superstar development when that's the case. And getting superstar for an offensive lineman is the hardest position in this game to get superstar. So you pass up on that opportunity. Jalen Randall here is the case of the upside. He is the most talented football player in this class. I do not think it is particularly close. When he is on the field, he's better at doing what he does than anybody in this draft. He has A power moves, A finesse move. He has great size at 6'3", 266. Age 22 is all right. Athletically, awesome player. Top speed is good to great. Acceleration is awesome. Strength is only, average, but that's factoring in like 3-4 ends in there as well. So I think his strength is going to be good for an edge player. What really makes this more of a conversation instead of a slam dunk, let's go Jalen Randall, is the fact that he has F injury and F stamina. Now, I used one of my week 11's focus players on him because I wanted to get a better understanding of his stamina and injury because they were both C to F. And the first time I checked this, his injury actually said D, not F. And so I'm thinking that that's got to mean that he doesn't have, the super, super low injury, that it's more kind of like borderline D to F. And historically, that's probably going to mean it's like right around 80 because low 80s is typically D, high 70s has typically been F in past Maddens. So I'm fairly confident he's not going to be the ultra prone, injury prone guy that like we saw in that last class with the receiver taken by the Bears or Patriots. I can't remember, the first receiver off the board. But he's going to have stamina issues. He's still going to have injury issues, even if it's not like the ultra injury prone player. My goodness, when he's on the field, A finesse, A power, A play rec, A awareness, A tackle. He's going to be elite when he's on the field. That's the upside. Do you get lucky with the injury? And do you get the production when he's on the field? Versus Jordan Towns, just the steady Eddie, awesome player. I have not made my decision yet. If you have an opinion on it, I would love to hear it in the comment section of this video. I'll wait as long as possible before recording. I'll try to record the off-season episode like the day I'm posting it, which will be a couple days after this video. That brings us to our decision here with our second first-round pick. I think there are two players that we could be targeting at that pick. It's going to be a mid-first-round pick. We have the Lions pick, who finished 8-9 on the year, and so they just missed the playoffs, so we're talking pretty much middle of the first round. And so there are two players that I think are under consideration. The third option would be to trade down, and we'll talk about trade down options here in a minute. But should we stay at that pick, I think there are two players that I will be considering. The first here is Paul Campbell, a 6'3", 210-pound receiver, 22 years old. Not an incredible athlete. Honestly, probably just going to be a little bit above average in that area. And that's kind of the theme of his game. He's a really good, solid player. He doesn't have this great game that's going to stand out and make him, one of the premier receivers in the league, but he's going to be somebody that you can trust. He's got good route running. Other than deep route being at D, and maybe catching traffic at well being C to F, that's a little bit concerning, but most of these things are just really solid. And so do you take a receiver, hopefully you hit in dev and you get somebody with a pretty good all-around game, just needs to work on maybe some deep threat upgrades, and get just another receiver that you trust. Whoever's playing quarterback for us next year, whether it's Randy McCoy or somebody that we draft, we need to have weapons. Weapons are a big deal in determining whether or not a player becomes good at the quarterback position. And so he is certainly going to be in the mix with that mid-first round pick. The other guy is Ramon Avant. Now, this is just a case of talent. He's 23 years old again. I don't like 23 years old. And he's at a position that we drafted in the first round last year. And the guy that we got in UDFA, Rodney Lastly, I don't hate him either. And so we don't really need off-ball linebacker. You just take probably the best talent that's going to be available at that pick. He's elite as a coverage backer. I think he's going to be above average to good as a run stopper as well. And you just invest in the defense. The defensive side of the ball is the side of the ball that I think you want to invest in early if you ever want it to be really good in this type of a franchise, because I feel like it's just so much easier for rookies and even second-year players to make impacts on offense than it is on defense. I think if you look back at just this year, Bobby Lambert, he's a superstar development player. He just got almost no pressure throughout the year. Wasn't very productive. Even a guy like Keontae Simmons, who was a sick draft pick, we drafted him as a 79 overall superstar development player. Played okay. It's going to take time for him to make the impact that I drafted him for, and I think that's just the case with a lot of defenders. It's very rare that you get, a Jamal Arnett who comes in and in their rookie years is one of the best at their position, where I feel like it's easier. Like, we drafted a normal dev Doug Odom, and he was in the conversation. He was top 10 voting for Offensive Player of the Year. He was top 5 receivers in the NFC. I just think it's a lot harder to get that kind of instant impact on defense, and you got to invest in it early. So that's why I would be willing to take him, even though we just invested in off-ball linebacker. Now, this is more with our 33rd pick and or a trade down from our mid-first round pick into the late first round. There are 3 players I like here. 2 of them are guards. Let's start with Josh Messina, who I think right now is the The offensive lineman, I would lean over the other Tyler Nance here. They're very similar athletes. They're both 23 years old. This draft, more than any draft I've ever done ever, is just you're going to have to draft 23-year-old players. I don't like doing it. It's 2 years of development that you're just chopping off. But if you want a good player, especially at the offensive line this year, and we need to invest in the offensive line with at least 1 pick, if not 2, you're going to have to take a 23-year-old. Messina, a lot of A to C's here. So he's on the short list of players that could be one of our off-season focus players. Are those A's, or those B's, or are those C's? What those come in as going to greatly impact how I view him. Now, the other guy who's, I'm pretty sure 100% going to be getting one of those off-season focuses is Tyler Nance, another guy, 23 years old. Again, very, very similar athlete. All 6 of his things that we don't know are A to C. Now, that's just super intriguing to me. I need to know how many of those are actually A. And we would know 4 of them, and then we'd get 2 of them down to, the last 2 down to a 2-letter grade range. So we really get to know this player very, very well. If those are A's, that would give him an advantage, I think, to me over Messina. If they're more B's and C's, probably got to give it to Messina. And then the last guy is my favorite defensive back in this class, and that's Anthony Torrance. He's 21 years old. He's 6'3". Doesn't have elite top speed, but he played college ball with Jamal Arnaud just last season. And Jamal Arnaud swears that this guy is the real deal. He's got B's across the board. He's got really, really good athleticism. He's really young, and he's not injury prone. Getting somebody who's both young and not injury prone at the top of this class and talented, it's just a very, very rare thing. Now you think about need. Malik Vincent, he ended up getting star dev by the end of the year. He really came on by the end as well after I kind of complained about him in the middle of this season. And Weber, I felt like, was just really solid all along. You got Keontae Simmons playing the slot. He's obviously a long-term player for us. So what's the need of corner on this team, especially early? It's tough to say, but I think we could just use more defensive backs in general because safety's not there, and maybe that could be a spot for him with his lack of top speed. But I really like Anthony Torrance. It's just, what's the need going to be there? Now we're talking about either a trade up from our 3rd pick or a trade down from our 2nd pick. More likely to be, honestly, I think both will be in play pretty heavily. There are 2 players here. One is Tyson Cohen. If we're taking a quarterback in this class, I really think it's Tyson Cohen. I just don't think the first-round quarterbacks are worth our attention here in this class. Tyson Cohen, above average, both athletically with his feet and with his arm strength. Probably, we'll just say B's across the board with his accuracy. He can throw on the run a bit. He can go play action. He can break sack a decent amount. And what I like about him is you don't have to take him in the 1st round. And so if you don't take quarterback in the 1st round, you're not putting a ton of pressure on him being the franchise quarterback forever. I think he puts pressure on Randy McCoy, makes that starting quarterback job very interesting. We can play it out in training camp and in the preseason and see who comes away with the job. And so, very intriguing player. And if we're going into next season with anybody other than Randy McCoy at the helm, it's probably Tyson Cohen. Then apart from him is my favorite tight end in this class, and that's Darren Phillips, 6'5", the most athletic tight end in this class. He has A short route, A stiff arm, C run block, and B carrying, E to C catching deep routes, B to D medium, B to D injury, C to F stamina. So injury and stamina is not the best. A to C awareness as well. I just think he's one of the 2 pass catchers that would be worthy of a selection here in this draft. He and Paul Cantwell, and he just doesn't require as much of an investment. Now, this is more late 3, early 4 area. There are 2 players. DJ McKnight, the power back. What I like about him is that he's 21 years old, and with running back, I don't have any regression sliders yet, but I will be making some. So getting 21 years old at running back is going to be very crucial here in this series because they're going to start to regress pretty fast, much like they do in real life. Again, I haven't set those sliders yet. Still waiting to either find some that I like by doing my own research or finding somebody else's research and copying it to my franchise. Once I have those sliders, I'll let everybody know, of course. But because running backs are going to regress so soon, it's important to get 21 years old. And DJ McKnight's really the only option I like at 21 years old. Unfortunately, his injury and stamina situation is really, really bad. But I would like a power back to complement what we have in Kershaw, who's more of kind of an elusive / receiving back. And then Justin Person, somebody I definitely want to come out of this draft with. He's 21 years old. He is an elite athlete and he has an elite skill, and that's his finesse rushing. He's also not injury prone. Again, this combination of not injury prone, young, and has athletic skill set, just it's so rare. If it's anything like previous Maddens, he's going to be some low 70s, either normal or star development player, but he's definitely going to have potential, even if he does end up with that normal dev. We need pass rush. How many times did I just say that the opposing quarterback had a million years in the pocket, man? Can't have that again. Earl Clark is more to stop the run. We allowed 400 more rushing yards than anybody else in the league. 350 pounds, elite strength. Gonna be another Warren Owens. Having 2 nose tackles is something that wouldn't work in real life, but could it work in Madden? I think it honestly might. And then a couple more, day 3 picks here. Jamal Wilcox. Again, do we need corner, but could he play safety? His athleticism definitely says yes, he's a safety, but his zone coverage is bad, but he just has a very unique skill set. He is an elite man press cover corner. The dude can tackle, the dude can press, the dude can play man coverage. Can he do anything else? I don't know, but he's 6'5" and he's only going to be taking a day 3 pick. I'm in on Jamal Wilcox. Marcus Alford is running back who I think is the most talented running back in this class. Again, you do lose that year. How important is that year going to be? I don't know. I think he's a really similar athlete to McKnight. We have a break tackle. We have a trucking confirmed. His stiff arm is A to C. Much better injury and stamina situation. But again, I just think it's going to be so important for 21 years old that even though I think Marcus Alford is the better prospect, I'd probably still even lean McKnight, which kind of sounds crazy. I might be crazy for that. I don't know. Pretty torn on who these I want to come out of the draft with more. And then the last guy I definitely want to spend a day 3 pick on is Deontay Hawkins. Going to be just an 8 power moves that you can get really late in the class with an above average athleticism. Pretty much Bobby Lambert. We have a second straight draft class with that kind of build on it. Want that. Well, that's not to say that there's a 0% chance of taking any of these guys. There's always potential for the draft to not go your way. Also, some of these, especially these UDFAs, I imagine I'll take 1 or 2 of these guys here. They're just some offensive linemen that are worth, taking a shot at maybe getting hidden dev, and then a couple of kickers in case we can't re-sign our kicker. It's coming off a kicker of the year campaign, of course. So I do want to get him back if we can. But yeah, there's the draft preview. If you're like, no matter what, we need Person, don't worry about McKnight, go Person into Alford. Or if you're saying 100% we need Cohen, we got to get some pressure on McCoy, don't go for the weapon in Darren Phillips, because a lot of these ranges we're choosing between, like, we're not going to get Towns and Randall. We're not going to get Campbell and Avant. We're not going to get Nance and Messina. So if you have any opinions on one or the other in any of these kind of either or picks, please let me know and I'll take it into consideration as we head into the draft. But that's all I've got for this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed this season stats and awards episode alongside, of course, the draft preview. I'll be back soon with the actual offseason and draft very soon, and I will see you then.